this week's portion, the Torah tells us of the tragic incident of the spies. Moses has sent out a group of leaders to go into the land of Israel and come back and bring back a report about the land. And they came back and they devastated. They really broke down the spirits of the people, and they said, we can't do it. We can't conquer this land of Israel. We're just not going to be successful. And the response of the Jewish people, crying in despair. God's response: you're crying? I told you the land is a good land. You're crying for no reason. Because you're crying for no reason, I'm going to give you a reason on this night to cry. And this is the expression: are you crying for nothing? I'll give you something to cry about. And the night was Tisha B'Av. Tisha B'Av, we know, is the anniversary of the destruction of the first temple and the second temple. Hearing this, we would assume that the reason for the destruction of the temples and the reason for our exile was because of our lack of faith, and we believed the spies and we cried for no reason. But the Talmud tells us that the reason for the destruction of the temples, the first temple, was destroyed because there was idol worship, immorality, even murder. And therefore we were exiled from our land. Temple destroyed. Second temple was destroyed because of baseless hatred of one Jew to another. Those are the reasons given to us in the Talmud. Yet, when looking at the Torah and looking at the commentaries on the Torah, it seems that the reason why the temple was destroyed was because we cried for nothing. Rabbi Shimon Schwab answers beautifully. The Talmud points out that in the book of Lamentations, written by the prophet Jeremiah, bemoaning the destruction of the temple, the verses are written in sequence of the Aleph base, the Hebrew alphabet, except the letters Ayin and Pei are reversed. When you recite the Hebrew alphabet, the letter Ayin, which actually means I, comes before the word Pei, which stands for Peh, which is mouth. And in the book of Lamentations, we go through, the verses go through this aleph base in the right sequence, except Jeremiah put the Pei before the Ayin. Hidden message. And the Talmud explains the message that the spies put the Peh, their mouth, before the Ayin, before their eyes. Actually, the eyes should become before the mouth. What does that mean? So Rabbi Shimon Schwab explains that what it means is that the spies had an eye problem. Their eyes were limited. They went into the land of Israel and they saw things that could be very scary. But what they missed was the sanctity, the holiness of the land. They didn't feel when they passed by the graves, Hebron, the graves of our forefathers, they didn't feel the sanctity. They didn't see it, so they didn't feel it. When they passed by Mount Moriah, the place of the sacrifice of Isaac and where the temples were going to be built, they didn't feel that elevation, that spiritual elevation. Their eyes saw, but not that which was inside. The eyes saw the outside. The eyes were deficient. So the Peh came before the Ayin. The mouth spoke negatively. What was the problem? They couldn't sense the spirituality of the land of Israel. They didn't sense its holiness. They saw what was outside and not what was within. This is the reason, Rav Schwab explains, why during the era of the First Temple, why we were remiss in so many different areas. And why at the time of the Second Temple we were remiss. Why? Because we did not appreciate the spirituality of the land. We saw the land but didn't realize the holiness that is within the land, the internal spirituality. And because of that, that's why our forefathers transgressed at the time of the First Temple and the time of the Second Temple. Because if we were able to see and sense the spirituality of the land of Israel, the holiness, then we never would have transgressed in the first place. This is a powerful message, of course, for sensing the greatness, the grandeur of the land of Israel, but also for sensing the grandeur that is within each and every one of us. We look at ourselves in the mirror, what do we see? We see a body, that's what we see. But within the body is the soul. And if all we see is a body and all we sense is a body, then it's impossible for us to behave in a spiritually uplifted manner. So let's ask ourselves the question. When we look at ourselves, look in the mirror and look at ourselves, what do we see? We see features, we see a body. We've got to have the spiritual eyes to be able to see within ourselves and to realize how holy we are. It's the internal that is actually our true selves. And as Rav Schwab explains, if only we realize the spiritual grandeur that is within us, then we would continue to elevate ourselves. We would value ourselves in an amazing way and continue constantly to spiritually uplift ourselves. May Hashem bless us and give us good eyes, eyes that can see that which is real, the soul, the neshama within each and every one of us, so that we know our own spiritual strength. Have a fabulous Shabbos.